Okay, so hello everyone. We'll take a few moments to let people join us. Feel free to let us know where you're from in the chat, uh, where you're joining from. Just going to take a few minutes until a lot of people sign in. Wow, we got a lot of participants today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tricycle's meditation group. I'm James Shaheen, Tricycle's editor-in-chief, and I'm pleased to be here with you today for our first session with John Dunne, who is joining us weekly this month as part of Tricycle's Meditation Month. So if you aren't registered for Meditation Month, we'll drop the sign-up link in the chat. Meditation Month is our annual challenge to inspire or reinvigorate a daily practice. Participants receive a daily email with a meditation prompt, and we also share a new video every week. You can join at any time, and whenever you join, you'll start the 31-day program from day one. So I just want to say that, like a lot of you, I've been meditating for a very long time, and I'm finding John's meditation month videos immensely helpful. So whether you're a beginner or a longtime practitioner, I think you'll get a lot out of it. As I told John, it's always helpful to be reminded of all of the things that I forget, and I do forget. So a few notes before we begin. Today we're in a Zoom meeting, so our video is on. We have disabled your microphones for now, but we'll turn them back on for the Q&A at the end of the meditation. This session is being recorded, so please note that if you ask your question live, you will be in the recording. You can also ask in the chat if you'd like. So, John Dunne is our meditation teacher for this month. He is Distinguished Professor of Contemplative Humanities at the Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also teaches for Buddhist communities, especially Upaya Zen Center, and he's a great exponent of the Dharma. That's all I can say. So welcome, John.
Thanks very much, James. It's really great to be here. And hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. I see there's people from all around the world. Somebody from West Cork, where I spent some time, in Skull, and also in Kinsale. And then someone from Latvia I saw, and people from all around the world. So welcome. Really great to have you here for us to practice together. So what we'll do is let's start with a practice, just a very basic awareness practice where we can think of cultivating mindful awareness. So first, our first thing is always to just kind of find a position that allows us to be alert but also relaxed. And when we do that, we don't have to be, there are very formal meditation positions, and some traditions really emphasize the formality of the position. But you can meditate in really any bodily position as long as you can find that kind of balance between relaxation and alertness. And an easy way to do that is to have the spine direct but relaxed. As my friend Roshi Joan Halifax likes to say, a strong back and a soft front. And then, as you wish, with your eyes open or closed. The style of practice, that's my home base. We tend to meditate with the eyes open, but closed is fine. Let's just first bring up an intention for our practice here together. Why are we here? What are we seeking? What are our motivations in relation to others? And then just invite the mind to rest on an anchor for the attention. Perhaps the sensations of breathing at the abdomen. There's no need to fixate. No need even to figure anything out. Just allow the mind to rest on that anchor. As thoughts come and go, feelings, emotions, simply notice. No need to jump on the train of thoughts, but if you do, that's fine. Simply notice, let go, and invite the mind back to the anchor. There's an old saying in Tibet, if you force the mind, it'll be like a recalcitrant camel. It'll resist. So no need to force. Just invite. There's no need for anything special to happen. Let's let go of our hopes, our expectations, our doubts. Just be present now, in this present, fresh moment of consciousness, just right now. Notice how if you let go of expectation, it's easier to let go of effort. And if you let go of effort, it's easier to allow the mind to settle on its own, just naturally settling on the anchor for attention. All right, let's gently move out of this first session. Allow your attention to expand back into our cyberspace together here. So in the tradition that I'm practicing the most in these days, which is a tradition descending through Toku and Rinpoche, but that actually has a lot of alignments with other Buddhist traditions. I was just talking with my friend Joseph Goldstein the other day, and we're always amazed to see how much alignment there is between, for example, even Vipassana and these non-dual Tibetan traditions. And one of the things that they definitely align around is actually what we mean by mindfulness. And part of the emphasis in these Tibetan traditions is there's an emphasis on a kind of mindfulness that we call the mindfulness of mere non-distraction. And I'll say a tiny bit about that today, but then we'll probably say more about that next week. But when we talk about mindfulness, what we mean is that mindfulness really just means that which prevents us from being distracted. This is in what we call the Abhidharma, these ancient texts of kind of Buddhist psychology. The there are different kinds of mental functions, and one of them is called literally in Sanskrit, smrti, or in Pali, sati. These are the two best known Indic Buddhological languages. And smrti literally means, smrti and sati, they literally mean memory. So this is really a kind of metaphor when it's used to describe this particular aspect of the mind. So when we forget something, we're kind of lost, right? So if we're trying to attend to something, we're trying to keep our mind from being caught by something else, what we call attention capture in cognitive science. When we're getting pulled away by something else, that's when we're distracted. So to be distracted is to experience that attention capture. And what mindfulness does for us is mindfulness actually prevents us from having our attention captured in that way. It's a function of the mind, a natural function of the mind that we all have, which enables us to sustain attention on something. So one of the ways of working with mindfulness, I'm just going to lower my screen a tiny bit. One of the ways of working with mindfulness is actually to, in a sense, not challenge ourselves too hard, but allow the natural process of attending to unfold. So there are different styles, and this is a style that is kind of de-emphasizing too much effort. And for that reason, then also, it's good to do short sessions. So in this tradition in Tibetan we talk about tun tun drang mang, which means short sessions many times, which you'll hear me speak about in the videos as we go forward. And the idea here is to maintain a certain kind of freshness in the mind. Let's do that again. So we're taking this little break. I want to encourage that idea of allowing the attention, natural capacity for attention in the mind to unfold, to not force the mind. This idea of the recalcitrant camel. I love that image. Apparently, if you try to force a camel to do something, it will definitely not do it. You have to like skillfully say, "Hey, I don't know what camels like to eat, but here you go. It's one of yours." So, or like sometimes a little puppy, is the same kind of thing, right? So, treat your mind like that, right? Maybe it's a little puppy that needs to be coaxed into finally finding a place where it's nice and relaxed, where it is attending and focused, but not being forced. And so it's easier to do that, especially in the beginning, if we do relatively short sessions. We'll talk about the implications of that at our next break, but let's start another session now. We've got an hour together, and there will be time for your questions. But I just want to do maybe at least one more session or maybe two. So we'll just do a short session again. Let's find our position, just dropping in, relaxed but alert. I mean, sometimes it's helpful to have a sense of stability in the body. If you're in a chair, maybe the feet flat on the floor, and then just dropping the attention down into the body and simply allowing Mother Earth to hold us naturally. Notice how the mind just wants to pay attention to something. When we experience the monkey mind, the mind attending to this and that and the other thing, it's just doing what it does. Pays attention. So we're skillfully trying to help to guide the mind to allow its natural capacity for attention to settle, to have a more sustained attention, undistracted, not lost. So again, inviting the mind to an anchor, perhaps the sensations of breathing or sound, or a sensation like the feet, feeling of the feet on the floor, whatever it is, just invite the mind to that anchor. And then in a way, step back. Just notice. There's no need to stop thoughts. There's no need to block out sensations. Just don't cling. Don't grasp. You're attending to the breath. Just allow the mind to gently ride on the breath. The breath isn't really the object of our meditation. It's just an anchor. There's no need to control anything. All right, again, let's gently move out of our practice session. Come back into this space together. So one of the things about meditation practice in general is we can kind of have a feeling like, oh, I'm not doing it right. That's very understandable because we do seem to be giving you a task, and we can have the idea that, oh, we can be right or wrong about this task. If I'm supposed to make Toll House cookies, then, if I don't have chocolate chips in them, how can that be the right Toll House cookie? So we may have this kind of feeling like, oh, we've got to do this the right way. And there are styles of practice that might emphasize that more. But there's one of the things that we're really trying to do. Uh, One of the things I'm just noticing in the chat, someone is saying it's low volume. Is that right? Can you guys hear me all right? Volume's okay, not low? Okay. Um, uh, it is this, in a way, part of what we're trying to do is just become familiar with experience itself. So really all Buddhist practices, to some extent, that's what they're about. They're about just noticing what our experience is, becoming familiar with experience, rather than sort of blindly just going through the day and not paying attention at all to what's happening to us, which, of course, as we all know, doesn't always work out very well, especially when we get worked up. But actually learning about our experience. What is the nature of our experience? What is it like to be a human, so to speak? And one of the things about experience is, it would be a little silly to say to someone, experience is really what we are. When we're conscious, it's being conscious. And can you say, oh, you're being conscious the wrong way? That's not the right way to be conscious. That doesn't really make sense, right? It's kind of like you're just conscious. If you're not conscious, raise your hand. No, I'm kidding. But, if you're conscious, how can you be doing it the wrong way? So you can think of, in a way, that's the kind of practice we're talking about here as well. If we are just being aware, simply being present, then it's simply being conscious, then it's the right way. So you could say, in a sense, that there's no wrong way to do this kind of practice. We just want to be present and not lost. To simply cultivate that kind of mindfulness that is a mindfulness of non-distraction. We're going to learn more about some other aspects of mindfulness, including what we call sampajanya in Sanskrit, or sampajanya in Pali. This is this term that sometimes people talk about it as clear comprehension, but in this context, it's better to talk about it as meta-awareness. I think we'll probably save most of that for next time, but we'll see what your questions are that have come up for you this week. But I do want to say one thing about doing it right or wrong, or actually two things. One of them is and I've experienced this, and many of you may have experienced this. You're meditating, you're trying to practice, and you feel like your monkey mind is all over the place, and it's just somehow you think you're doing it wrong, and then I get down on myself for doing it wrong. And then I remember I'm not supposed to get down on myself for doing it wrong, so I get down on myself for getting down on myself. And then it can just keep going, right? So what do we do with that? What we do with that is actually part of that is this just that sort of effortlessness. It's like not forcing things. When it's not that big a deal, then why would you get down on yourself for it? So that's one. Effortlessness can help relax that feeling, but also then bringing a kind of kind attention, a sense of almost like friendliness, openness, non-judgmentalness into the practice can be very helpful as well. And the second thing I want to note is that when we do these short sessions, we're probably most of the time, for many of you, you probably aren't going to get into a really deep, profound kind of what you might think of as a profound meditative state. And we're not really trying to get to that style here. We're not trying to get into something very deep and profound and still. That's not the point here. Actually, in a way, what we're trying to do is cultivate a capacity to be more aware while we're out in the world, right? So to not have our minds just pulled in every other direction, our experiences, our emotions, and to not have to sit somewhere quietly in order to gather ourselves, but actually to bring these capacities out into our lives. So this style of practice is much more about that, and that's another reason that we do this kind of short session. And in those short sessions, even so, you can have something. It's sort of in all the Buddhist traditions talk about two basic flaws, if you like, or two issues, challenges in meditation. One of them is a kind of dullness or sinking, and the other is excitement. So dullness or sinking, its sort of endpoint is falling asleep. That's when you're so dull that you're starting to fall asleep. And excitability is when you're so excited that your mind nothing seems to settle at all. And there are different ways of dealing with this, but interestingly, one way to deal with this is just with the body and with the eyes. So if you're meditating with your eyes open, simply lowering the gaze or raising the gaze can help to modulate a little bit this sinking or excitability. Raise the gaze if you're sinking too much, lower the gaze if you're too excited. And also with the body, you can actually tense, you can't see my thighs, but you can actually sort of grab your thighs and tense up like this with the arms just a little bit in the middle of a session if you're really starting to feel tired, and that can actually bring a little energy into the mind. And likewise, you can just really emphasize a sort of relaxation and even allow yourself to slouch a little if you're so intense, if the energy is too high. So that's a couple of very simple little techniques that you can use. Let's take another short session, maybe about 5 minutes, and then we'll move into some questions. Now, as we're beginning, let me show you another technique that I find can be very helpful, especially if I'm a little worked up. And that is to simply raise the shoulders like this, rotate back, then forward, and then up. One more time. And then on this third time, just settle down into the body and allow the mind to settle on the anchor. Simply allow the mind to naturally be conscious, to attend. There's no need to evaluate, no need to give yourself a grade. Simply be present. Thoughts can come and go, sensations, sounds in the environment. All of that can happen without pulling your mind away from its basic capacity for being aware. The stability of your attention does not disappear when a thought passes by. All right, so let's again return to this space together. And now perhaps we can move to some questions. I
Thank
do want to say one last, James, just really quick, one last thing is when we're paying attention in this way, I said thoughts can come and go, and that doesn't have to disrupt the stability of your attention. And one way you can see this is if you use breath counting, counting the breaths in and out is one, in and out is two. You can see that the counting doesn't have to disrupt the attention on the breath. So this isn't multitasking. It's not where you're paying attention to two different things. But there's a kind of attention. There are things that can appear in consciousness without us fixating on them. So when we're multitasking, we're trying to like actually grasp multiple things at the same time, and that really doesn't work. But there can be multiple contents in our experience, and they're coming and going, and they don't have to disrupt the stability of our awareness. We don't have to get captured. So, sorry, James, just wanted to make that one last point. So, and then happy to move on to questions.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Anne, we'll get to you in just a minute. I'd just like to explain to everyone how this works. You can ask a question in the chat or raise your Zoom hand, and we always call on the Zoom hands first, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. If you raise your hand, I'll ask you to unmute, and when I call your name. So please keep your questions related to the practice, and please keep your questions brief so others can have a chance to ask. And again, if you ask a question live, you will be in the recording. So let's start with Anne. Anne, can you unmute?
Hi. Yes, you had said earlier that the breath is not the object of our meditation. It's just an anchor. And I'm wondering, okay, so is there an object of our meditation? And does how does what we've been practicing today, is that kind of like what Joseph Goldstein calls open awareness?
Yes, very good, and that's a great question. And I saw John Rogrove, I think, in the chat had a very similar question. And I love that people notice that distinction when I said it's not an object, it's an anchor. And so this comes from the style of these non-dual styles of practice. One of them in Tibet is called Mahamudra, the Great Seal practice. And that's often combined with another practice called Dzogchen, or the Great Perfection. And when Joseph talks about open awareness, he's often referring, I think, to that kind of Dzogchen, that's that Great Perfection style. And basically, yes, in a way, what we are doing, because this is, sort of my home base, we're doing a style of practice that's more moving in that direction. But I want to say that it can be helpful, and in many ways, the basic practice is similar across multiple traditions. But part of the reason we say so in Mamudra, for example, they'll say the breath is the Tibetan word they use is a jeto, which means like a to-do list. Actually, it's a list you have so that you don't forget something. And so your breath is your kind of it's your little note you've made to yourself. Oh, and what are you not to forget is not to forget awareness, right? Just being present. So the breath kind of helps anchor us in that way, but we're not trying to focus on the breath. There's going to be, because part of what we're going to do eventually, and we'll do these practices more next week, is we're going to try to, in a sense, sort of move back and into a more open awareness where we're cultivating more of that meta awareness that I mentioned briefly. And that turns out to be something that's extremely useful, like in ordinary life, to have that kind of meta awareness. So we'll say more about that next time. But that's a great question, Anne. And I think probably several people had a very similar question. So yes, it's our sort of reminder. Another term you could use is the breath. We're using the breath or maybe a sound or whatever as a kind of reminder of being present, but we're not trying to focus on it, like figure out what it is.
Okay, we have a question from Chuck. You
Hi.
want to?
You mentioned in the practice we were doing that thoughts could come or you'd hear things and that it shouldn't allow us to interrupt our focus. And I like that idea a lot. The question I'm coming to, I guess, my whole life I've struggled with distraction from particularly conversations. If I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody and there's another one going on at the table next door, or the television's on, the radio's on, it drives me nuts. I can't focus on the person I'm trying to talk to. This other thing is going on over here, and I'm hearing part of that, and I'm here. And so I'm wondering whether, there are different, I don't know, sort of cognitive styles or cognitive skills or something that we could take account of as we're trying to get our hands wrapped around this not being distracted part. Um, Things we could do to help us not be captured by this other conversation that's going on around us. Or is it just a matter of practice?
Uh, I think it's partially a matter of practice, but again, it is also a natural capacity that we have. However, it's well known, I think actually in Buddhist traditions, but here I'm thinking more about cognitive science. Like if something's going to capture your attention, somebody speaking will do that for sure. Singing a song or speaking is really like it just goes on, it really does definitely capture your attention. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about not being captured, not being lost, so to speak, right?
For sure.
So one of the techniques that we'll maybe do a little bit more next week is when you are captured, and you can give this a try, is actually then focus intently. Now we are going to focus. We're going to take something as an object, and we're going to take as an object is the distraction. And we're going to look at, so if it's a conversation, like, yeah, hone in on the conversation, but instead of listening to the words, which is how we interpret the sounds, listen to the sounds. Like, what is this really? You know, if I speak slowly, you can sort of hear the sounds instead of the words, right? Instead of interpreting the words, which is what our mind, this is why it captures us, because it's so automatic, it's so deep. So instead, try to just listen to those sounds. Go right into the distraction and look directly at what it is.
Hmm.
Especially look at it from the standpoint of it being an experience. Like, what is this? What is an experience? And that may help, even if it doesn't totally dissolve the distraction, it'll actually help your practice in other ways.
Okay.
So, but that's a great question, and I don't think you're the only one who struggles with that, Chuck. So,
Often I find, I'm talking to somebody and they don't seem to mind having the television on, but I'm like, you
yeah.
know,
Well, there you go. So yeah, just allowing that to, seeing it deliberately. And then the other thing is I would say that is as that sort of, you know, the emotional reaction to that emerges, then also noticing that.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and even looking at that, because that's
And not
kind of
becoming
part of the
attached to the
distraction.
to the discomfort.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then turn the mind to that and say, what is that? And so, and then when it sort of dissolves, then you can just come back to resting in the anchor. Or if you're having your conversation, you can sort of step back from the intensity of like, I got to figure this out, and then maybe
Mm,
listen more effectively.
mm. Thank you.
Okay, John, we have a question from Carol Rose who says, many thanks, John. I find that I repeat words mantras. Your thoughts on that?
I don't think there's anything intrinsically problematic with that. That can also be, you can use that kind of repetition as an anchor as well. I think you know, that kind of thing can become, uh, let's say for the practice, we don't want the mind to be like totally drawn into something in this context, actually. That's why we're saying we're just going to rest the mind on the breath or on the anchor, right? So we don't really want to necessarily be so intently drawn into something. So if a mantra or a sound is really kind of intently drawing you in, you may want to try something else for a while. But if it's a sort of almost like background music, mantra as background music, uh, elevator mantra. If you could just sort of allow it to sort of be a sustained anchor like the breath. The breath is great because it's always happening. You don't have to do anything to make it happen. And so you can just always come back to that as something that, kind of anchors the attention. Because part of the idea here of anchoring the attention is we're going to eventually kind of open up to much more of what the mind is not on, not the object, but what everything else that's happening, right? And so the reason we don't want to just go like, oh, fixate on that object, some styles of practice are about high energy focus on an object, is that that doesn't really allow us to see everything else in the background. That can be useful too, but we want in this practice, we're going to try to sort of be aware of much more than what we're paying attention to, or what the mind is attending to as an object, or in our sense as an anchor. So we don't want a mantra. There are styles of mantra practice where you're really trying to go deep and you're using the mantra to go deep, and that's not what we want to do in this style. But you can do whatever you like.
Thank you, John. Okay, Audrey, would you like to unmute?
Yes. My question is, what if you have a distraction in a fly with a fly in your apartment?
I'm not sure I caught that. What if we have, say that again,
A
Audrey?
distraction like a fly in an apartment.
Oh, if you've got like a fly in the apartment, that's yes. Well, then you have a very great opportunity for practice, is what you have. Because like to be able to, in a sense, so what's attention capture? What's it like? We all know what it's like to be distracted, like we're trying to do something and then something else is like a fly pulling us away. And what goes with that, and we heard this from Chuck as well, is it's not just that there's something like a sound or whatever that is saying that's getting our attention, that there's a feeling, basically a kind of emotion that goes with attention. So this is what is really interesting about attention, is that attention is not emotionally neutral. We pay attention to things that we care about. And there's lots of things happening, like in your room right now, which you don't even notice because you don't care about them. They're not important to you. There's lots of things happening in my environment here. I'm not paying attention to them because they don't matter to me. So we pay attention because something somehow is important to us. And even, and that gives this emotional feeling. So it could be a good thing. Like, so then we feel, attraction or desire, or we want to get that thing, or it can be a bad thing. And then we have this irritated negative feeling. So part of what we want to do with those kinds of distractions is to set aside, is to notice the feelings that are going on, but then actually just see, like I was saying to Chuck, just see what that thing is itself, right? And that's where we actually are gonna, now it's not an anchor, we're gonna turn our focus to the fly. And what does that sound like really? What are the emotions that are happening there, right? And in a sense, part of what can happen then is it changes. Like what you're feeling and what you're hearing even can, when you really pay attention to it, it changes and then it stops capturing your attention. So see if that works. But having meditated in places where there are a lot of flies, I can say that just like I guess that's probably number two, maybe after people talking, is a bunch of flies. That's a good challenge. So you've got a great opportunity there, Audrey, to really cultivate some great meditation.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, John. Okay, we from Daryl Gregory. Can you talk about attachment to a state of mind or outcome in meditation?
Yes, sure. That's a great question. And this is going to vary a little bit across different traditions. So some traditions are going to emphasize the importance of really kind of having a particular kind of goal and you're trying to get to a certain place, and they'll even talk about different levels of practice and all that sort of thing. In some traditions, like the one that that I'm feeling is kind of my home base, is much less interested in that. But for all traditions, too much striving is not a good thing. that can have all kinds of negative outcomes. You could say in a way that one of the key aspects of that notion of like an attachment to a state or to a goal in meditation, one way of thinking about that is that it's not, you're not here now anymore when we're doing that. Um, so what I mean by that is, and we've mentioned this a little bit, the importance of just being present fully right now. And one of the aspects that we'll talk a little more about next week of distraction is that when distraction comes in the way of thoughts, thoughts are always about what in cognitive science we call mental time travel, right? And this is very much part of a Buddhist theory. When I'm thinking about something, I'm almost always thinking about the past or the future. At least a little bit, I'm connecting to my past experience, but often I'm thinking very concretely about something that's not right now. So thoughts pull us out of the present moment, and therefore we're not just being present, we're not cultivating that kind of natural awareness. We're getting pulled away, we're getting captured. So I think the instance of attachment to a state or to a goal is a particular brand or version of that that can be challenging because the state, you can have a state, you can even be in the state, but then you say, oh, this is a great state. You're not in the state anymore, right? Or even if I'm feeling the state and I go, this is wonderful, now I'm out of the state. I'm into my evaluation, I'm into my thoughts, right? I'm thinking about other great things, right? When I say it's great, the meaning of that thought itself is also about our past experience of great things. And it's also about the things that we don't like the not great things, right? So all of the thought is not about what's happening right now. It's not about the state. So one way perhaps to get through that is to, when those arise, to just recognize them as thoughts. And we'll talk about that soon, next week too, which is seeing thoughts as thoughts, not as reality. Thoughts are just thoughts. And that enables us to maybe come back to the present. But anyway, that's a very important issue in this style. It's especially important to not get fixated on you can have all kinds of wonderful experiences, meditation. It's very important not to get fixated on those.
Thank you, John. Christine, would you like to unmute? You're still muted. You're still muted.
There we go. Okay. Uh, I'm really appreciating this session and what's being offered. I'm unable to see a couple or attend like every other every other session, question and answer, Zoom meeting. Is there some way we can see them after the fact?
Yes, we're recording these and you'll be able to see them. Maybe Amy, you can say something about that before we close, or Allison.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for joining us. James, I saw a question from Mary Lutz in the chat. What about the right now state of pain? So yes, this pain, this is one of the places that's especially interesting. I have a colleague, for example, Eric Garland at the University of Utah, who's been working a lot with chronic pain patients and teaching them a style of practice that's not too different from what we're talking about, a secularized practice, a mindfulness kind of practice. And I think and John Kabat-Zinn also started the mindfulness-based stress reduction program originally in the pain clinic at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in Worcester, Massachusetts. And one of the things that's really interesting about pain is that when one goes into it in that way I was describing, instead of turning away from it, and this is where not being averse to our own experience is so important. I mentioned a kind of friendly attitude, but another way that's described is just non-aversion. If I'm averse to my own experience, like, I don't like these thoughts, or I don't like how this feels, then I won't really be able to examine it. And it will constantly distract me because I'll be worried about it coming up. So one of the things that's really interesting about cultivating that non-aversion with pain is to actually not run away from the pain, but to go into the pain. And when one does that, one of the amazing things that can happen is the pain changes. It doesn't, is you set aside the thought, this is pain, and instead of saying, this is pain, you ask yourself, what is this? What is this here? What is this feeling? What is the nature of this feeling? What's actually happening right now? And for some of Eric's patients, actually, amazingly, people who have had opioid use disorder and who, have been dealing with chronic pain for years, they learn this kind of practice and then they actually report the pain becomes blissful. Which, I'm not saying that's going to happen for all of us, but still, that shows you the power of that, actually, that way of attending. So hopefully that's helpful, Mary. It is, pain, having dealt with pain myself also, it's very challenging, and as I get older, it only gets more challenging. But I think there is a way in which setting aside the idea of pain and simply seeing what's happening can be helpful.
Thank you, John. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. These questions are great, and I'm sorry that we can't answer them all. And thank you, John, and thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our second session with John next Monday, January 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern. You can join from this same Zoom link. I should also mention earlier, somebody asked about how they see the ones they miss. There is a link in the chat for you. As we've mentioned before, we love hearing your feedback about this Zoom session series, so please write to us at feedback@tricycle.org with any comments or suggestions. We'll see you all next week, and thank you again, John. That was great.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for
Thank
being
you.
here together. Looking forward to next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
John. Wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.